Back away from me before I show this whole street what you really are!
Evelyn Whitmore stumbled back from Malcolm Greer, pressing one hand to her cheek, as her voice rose for every neighbor to hear.
He hit me! He struck me in the face because I told him to get off my property!
Malcolm stood still in the driveway, both hands open.
Mrs. Whitmore, I never touched you.
Evelyn's eyes filled instantly, but her stare stayed sharp as she lifted her phone.
Don't stand there acting innocent. I know what you did, and the police are gonna know too.
Malcolm didn't step toward her.
Call them if you want, but tell them the truth.
Evelyn pressed 911 and broke into loud, shaking sobs.
Please hurry! My neighbor attacked me, and I'm afraid he'll do it again!
Minutes later, 2 cops arrived, one already reaching for his cuffs. Evelyn had no idea the quiet man she was framing was a federal judge. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The afternoon sun beat down on Ashford Pines like a spotlight on a stage. Perfect lawns stretched in neat rows. Imported flowers lined driveways that cost more than most people's cars. Everything looked peaceful from the outside. Malcolm Greer walked slowly back from Marisol Vega's house, his sleeves rolled up from helping her move that heavy ceramic planter. The thing had weighed at least 60 pounds. At 68, Marisol was too proud to ask for help, but too smart to hurt herself trying. He wiped sweat from his forehead. The Georgia heat made everything stick to your skin. Even in this fancy neighborhood, summer was summer. "Excuse me!" The voice cut through the quiet afternoon like a knife. Malcolm turned toward the sound. Evelyn Whitmore marched across her pristine driveway. Her blonde hair was pulled back tight. Her white tennis outfit looked fresh from the country club. Her face was already red with anger. Malcolm had seen that look before, in courtrooms, on defendants who knew they were caught but planned to fight anyway. "Ma'am?" Malcolm kept his voice level. "Don't ma'am me." Evelyn's heels clicked against the pavement as she got closer. "I saw what you did." Malcolm glanced around. A few neighbors had stopped their yard work. Mrs. Patterson across the street pretended to water her flowers while watching. The mail carrier slowed his truck. "I'm not sure what you mean," Malcolm said. "My roses." Evelyn pointed toward her flower beds. "You stepped all over my property. Those bushes cost $300 each, imported from Europe." Malcolm looked at the roses. They sat behind a low decorative fence, at least 4 feet from the sidewalk. He had never been close enough to touch them. "I helped Mrs. Vega with a planter on the sidewalk," Malcolm said. "I never left the public walkway." "Liar." Evelyn's voice got louder. She took another step toward him. "I watched you from my kitchen window." Darius Bell looked up from the hedge he was trimming 2 houses down. The teenager's face went tight with worry. He had worked in Ashford Pines for 3 years. He knew Evelyn's voice meant trouble for somebody. Malcolm stayed calm. In 25 years as a federal judge, he had faced down drug dealers, corrupt politicians, and corporate lawyers. One angry suburban woman did not scare him, but something felt wrong. Evelyn's anger seemed too big for trampled flowers, too practiced, like she had been rehearsing this moment. "Mrs. Whitmore," Malcolm said, "I understand you're upset, but I promise you, I didn't damage anything." "Don't you dare promise me anything." Evelyn moved closer, close enough that Malcolm could smell her expensive perfume. "You people think you can do whatever you want." The words hit like a slap. Malcolm's jaw tightened. He knew exactly what "you people" meant. More neighbors appeared. Some stood in doorways. Others found reasons to check their mailboxes. Phones came out. The afternoon entertainment was starting. Malcolm noticed something strange. Every time Evelyn yelled, she backed up a step. She was moving toward her front door. toward the camera mounted beside it. She was putting on a show, and she wanted it recorded. "Ma'am, please step back," Malcolm said. Evelyn ignored him. She jabbed her finger toward his chest, getting closer with each word. "I know exactly what you're trying to do. Moving into this neighborhood, acting like you belong here." Marisol hurried over from her yard, her face worried. "Evelyn, what's going on?" "Stay out of this, Marisol." Evelyn spun toward the older woman. "Unless you want to explain why you're helping criminals damage private property." "Criminal?" Malcolm's voice stayed steady, but his eyes went cold. "That's a serious accusation." "The truth usually is." Evelyn smiled. It was not a nice smile. Malcolm raised one hand, palm out, not reaching for Evelyn, just telling her to stop. "Ma'am, I need you to step back and lower your voice." That was when Evelyn made her move. Her own hand came up fast. She slapped her left cheek hard enough to leave a red mark. The sound echoed across the quiet street. Then she stumbled backward, her arms flailing like someone had shoved her. "He hit me!" Evelyn screamed. "He hit me right in front of my house!" The scream cut through the peaceful afternoon like a knife through silk. Evelyn stumbled backward another step, one hand pressed to her reddened cheek. Her other hand fumbled for her phone with theatrical desperation. "Did you see that?" she shouted to the gathering neighbors. "He attacked me, right here on my own property." Malcolm stood frozen, his raised hand still extended in the same peaceful gesture. He did not move, did not speak, did not even lower his arm. Any sudden motion would look like guilt now. The neighbors crept closer. Mrs. Patterson, from 3 houses down, clutched her grocery bags tighter. Mr. Rodriguez stopped walking his dog and stared. The young mother with the stroller backed away, but kept watching. Evelyn pressed 911 on her phone. Her voice shook as she spoke, but her eyes stayed sharp and calculating. "Yes, I need police immediately," she sobbed into the phone. "I've been assaulted. A man just hit me in front of my home. Please hurry. I'm terrified." Darius Bell stood 20 feet away beside his lawnmower. His phone was up, still recording. His hands trembled, but he kept the camera steady. He had seen everything. The slap, the stumble, the lie. But who would believe a 17-year-old lawn worker over a wealthy white woman? "Evelyn!" Marisol called out, her voice firm with authority. "Stop this nonsense. I saw exactly what happened. You hit yourself." Evelyn whipped around, tears streaming down her face. Real tears now, but not from pain. From rage. "How dare you defend him?" Evelyn's voice cracked with emotion. "I trusted you, Marisol. I thought you were better than this." "The truth is not about taking sides," Marisol shot back. "You slapped your own face." "I watched you do it." "You're lying to protect him." Evelyn pointed at Malcolm, who still had not moved. "Both of you are lying." More neighbors gathered. Some whispered to each other. Others pulled out their phones. The circus was growing. Malcolm finally lowered his hand. Slowly, carefully. Every movement deliberate and visible. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said quietly, "we both know what really happened here." "Yes, we do." Evelyn's tears stopped as quickly as they had started. "You attacked an innocent woman because you got caught trespassing?" 3 minutes passed like hours. Then the sirens came wailing down Maple Street. 2 patrol cars pulled up fast. The first officer out was broad-shouldered and impatient-looking. His name tag read Callahan. The second officer was younger, thinner, nervous. His tag said Bauer. Evelyn ran toward them, sobbing again. Fresh tears on command. "Officers, thank God you're here," she cried. "That man assaulted me when I asked him to stay off my property." Callahan looked at Evelyn's red cheek, then at Malcolm standing calmly in the street. His mind was already made up. "Sir, Turn around and put your hands behind your back, Callahan barked. Malcolm did not move. Officer, may I ask if I'm under arrest? You're about to be if you don't start cooperating. Callahan's hand moved toward his cuffs. Turn around. Now. Officer Bauer shifted uncomfortably. Something felt off, but Callahan was senior. Bauer stayed quiet. The watching neighbors pressed closer. Phones captured everything. Malcolm could feel their stares like weights on his shoulders. This was what Evelyn wanted. The public shame, the assumption of guilt, the image of a black man in handcuffs on her perfect street. I saw her hit herself, Marisol called out desperately. She's lying. But Callahan ignored her. His attention was locked on Malcolm. Last warning, Callahan said. Hands behind your back. Evelyn watched with satisfied eyes. Victory was seconds away. Callahan stepped forward and grabbed Malcolm's wrist roughly. That was when Malcolm spoke, his voice calm and clear. Officer Callahan, before you place those cuffs on me, I strongly suggest you confirm my full name. Callahan's grip loosened slightly on Malcolm's wrist. His eyes narrowed with suspicion, but something in Malcolm's tone made him pause. What did you say your name was? Callahan asked, though his voice had lost some of its earlier aggression. Malcolm Greer, Malcolm replied evenly. The Honorable Malcolm Greer. Officer Bauer stepped closer, pulling out his radio. I'll run it, he said quietly to Callahan. Evelyn's face tightened. She could sense the shift in the air, the way both officers suddenly seemed less certain. Her tears had dried up, replaced by sharp attention. Don't let him intimidate you with some fancy title, she said quickly. Rich people always claim to be important when they get caught. But Bauer was already speaking into his radio, reading off Malcolm's name and asking for a full background check. The response came back within seconds through his earpiece. Bauer's expression changed completely. His eyes widened. He stepped back from Malcolm like he had just realized he was standing next to a loaded weapon. Callahan, Bauer said quietly, pulling his partner aside. We need to talk. What is it? Callahan snapped, irritated at being interrupted. Bauer leaned in and whispered something into Callahan's ear. Whatever he said made Callahan's face go pale, then red with embarrassment. Malcolm watched both officers carefully. He had seen this reaction before. The moment when people realized that the black man they had been ready to dismiss was someone who could end careers with a phone call. Callahan straightened his shoulders, trying to recover his authority. All right, so you're a judge. That doesn't mean you can go around hitting women. I did not hit anyone, Malcolm said firmly. And I suggest you take complete statements from all witnesses before writing your report. Evelyn stepped forward, sensing she was losing control. His job title doesn't matter. Look at my face. She pointed to her cheek, which was still red from where she had slapped herself. This man attacked me because he thinks he's above the law. Ma'am, please step back, Bauer said nervously. But Evelyn was not finished. You think being a judge makes you untouchable? You think you can intimidate me? Her voice rose with each word. People like you always hide behind your fancy titles when you get violent. Malcolm felt the familiar weight of coded language. People like you. He had heard those words his entire career, wrapped in different phrases, but always carrying the same poison. Officers, Malcolm said calmly. I recommend you interview Mrs. Vega and young Mr. Bell. They both witnessed the entire incident. Callahan looked at Marisol, who stood ready to speak, and then at Darius, who was still holding his phone by the lawnmower. The kid with the phone can wait, Callahan said dismissively. Mrs. Vega, Marisol said firmly. Marisol Vega, and I saw everything. You can give a statement in a minute, Callahan told her. Let me talk to Mrs. Whitmore first. Evelyn smiled. She was back in control. Officer, I have security footage that shows exactly what happened. She pulled out her phone with practiced ease as if she had been waiting for this moment. The screen showed a doorbell camera view of her driveway. "Here," she said, tilting the phone toward both officers. "You can see him raising his hand toward my face." Malcolm watched the clip over Bauer's shoulder. The angle was carefully chosen. It showed Malcolm's arm moving, but the crucial moment where Evelyn struck herself was cut off. The video ended just before her scream. Malcolm realized with cold clarity that this had been planned. The position near the camera, the partial angle, the convenient editing. "The clip is incomplete," he said quietly. Bauer nodded slowly. "It cuts off right before he hit me," Evelyn interrupted. The camera caught enough. Callahan seized on the footage like a lifeline. "This shows clear aggressive movement toward the victim." "That shows nothing definitive," Malcolm said. "Officer Bauer is correct. The crucial moment is missing." But Callahan was already pulling out his report pad. "I've got a woman with injuries and video evidence of threatening behavior. That's enough for documentation." Bauer looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. He was junior officer. Callahan was making the call. Evelyn stepped close to Malcolm while the officers discussed the report. She spoke in a voice only he could hear. Judge or not, people saw what they needed to see. Malcolm's phone buzzed in his pocket as Callahan finished writing his report. The sound cut through the tense silence that had settled over Evelyn's driveway like a funeral shroud. He pulled out the device, expecting perhaps a work email or a message from Lydia. Instead, his screen displayed an urgent notification from the Ashford Pines Homeowners Association. Emergency Community Safety Notice. Immediate action required. Malcolm's jaw tightened as he read the subject line. The email had been sent just minutes ago, before the police officers had even finished their paperwork. "Dear residents, due to a serious incident of violent conduct involving resident Malcolm Greer at 847 Maple Ridge Drive, the Community Standards Committee is calling an emergency meeting for tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. in the clubhouse. We must address this dangerous behavior and its impact on our neighborhood's safety and property values. Effective immediately, pending review, Mr. Greer's access to community amenities, pool, fitness center, clubhouse, guest parking codes, is temporarily suspended. The safety of our families comes first. Sincerely, Evelyn Whitmore, Chair Community Standards Committee." Malcolm read the message twice, his calm facade never slipping even as cold anger built in his chest. The email had gone out to every resident in Ashford Pines, 347 homes. Every neighbor who had watched from their windows would now see him labeled as violent and dangerous. Evelyn had moved faster than the legal system. She was not waiting for charges or investigations. She was destroying his reputation while the police cars were still parked outside. "Problem?" Officer Bauer asked, noticing Malcolm's focus on his phone. Malcolm looked up from the screen. Across the driveway, Evelyn stood on her front porch like a queen surveying her conquered territory. She was not hiding her satisfaction anymore. Her arms were crossed, and she watched him with the cold triumph of someone who believed the game was already over. "The HOA has already issued a community notice about this incident," Malcolm said quietly. "Before any investigation, before any charges, before you officers have even left the scene." Bauer's face flushed red. "That seems premature." Callahan shrugged. "HOAs move fast when safety's involved. They have a right to protect residents." "From what?" Malcolm asked. "A man who has not been charged with any crime?" "From a man who had an altercation with a neighbor," Callahan replied firmly. "The report documents aggressive behavior." Malcolm felt the trap closing around him. Evelyn had not just wanted a police report. She had wanted ammunition for a broader campaign. The incident report would justify the HOA restrictions. The restrictions would justify treating him like a threat. The threat narrative would justify making his life miserable until he chose to leave. A silver Honda Civic turned onto Maple Ridge Drive and pulled to the curb behind the police cars. Malcolm recognized his sister's car immediately. Lydia had received his text. The car door slammed with enough force to make both officers look up. Lydia Greer emerged like a storm cloud, her gray hair pulled back severely and her dark eyes blazing with protective fury. At 62, she moved with the determined stride of a woman who had spent 40 years as a nurse and would not be intimidated by anyone in uniform. "Malcolm?" she called out, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to crisis situations. "What is happening here?" Evelyn straightened on her porch, clearly recognizing another player entering the field. But Lydia was not looking at Evelyn. Her attention was fixed entirely on the police officers standing near her younger brother. "Ma'am, this is a police matter," Callahan said, stepping forward. I need you to explain why my brother is standing in handcuffs," Lydia interrupted, though Malcolm's hands were actually free now. "He's not in handcuffs," Bauer said nervously. "Then why are you still here?" Lydia demanded. "If no crime was committed, why are there 2 police cars in his driveway?" Malcolm moved toward his sister before the confrontation could escalate. "Lydia, not now." "Not now?" Her voice rose. "Malcolm, there are police officers treating you like a criminal in your own neighborhood. When exactly would be better?" "When we have facts instead of emotion," Malcolm replied calmly. He touched her arm gently. "Let them finish their work." Lydia's training as a nurse had taught her to read situations quickly. She saw Callahan's defensive posture, Bauer's obvious discomfort, and Evelyn's satisfied expression on the porch. She understood immediately that this was not about justice. "What did she accuse you of?" Lydia asked quietly. "Assault," Malcolm replied. "Did you touch her?" "No." "Then why is she standing there looking like she won the lottery?" Callahan cleared his throat loudly. "Ladies, I need to finish this report. The incident has been documented. Mrs. Whitmore has provided video evidence. Mr. Greer's conduct will be reviewed by the appropriate authorities." "What authorities?" Lydia asked sharply. "The HOA has jurisdiction over neighborhood conduct issues," Callahan explained. Malcolm watched his sister's expression shift from anger to something more dangerous. Lydia had always been protective, but she was also strategic. She had watched Malcolm endure decades of professional challenges that other men never faced. She knew exactly what this was. "Malcolm," she said quietly, "we need to talk. Privately." Callahan finished his paperwork with obvious relief. "Mr. Greer, you'll receive a copy of this report within 48 hours. Any questions about the process can be directed to the department." Both officers returned to their patrol cars. Bauer looked back once, his expression troubled, but said nothing more. As the police cars pulled away, the afternoon quiet returned to Maple Ridge Drive. Most neighbors had retreated indoors, though Malcolm could see curtains moving at several windows. The show was over, but the audience was still watching. Evelyn remained on her porch, arms still crossed, still smiling. Malcolm looked at the HOA email again, then at his sister's worried face, then at Evelyn's triumphant expression. "This was never about a slap," he told Lydia quietly. "She wants me gone." Malcolm's kitchen table became a makeshift war room. He spread out a legal pad, 2 pens, and his phone, while Lydia filled the kettle with water. The late afternoon sun slanted through the blinds, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. "Start from the beginning," Lydia said, turning on the burner. "Every detail." Malcolm began writing in his precise handwriting. The timeline first, 3:47 p.m., finished helping Marisol. 3:52 p.m., Evelyn emerged from her driveway. He noted her positioning throughout the confrontation, how she kept backing toward the doorbell camera while forcing him into the frame. "She knew exactly where to stand," Malcolm said, not looking up from his notes. The whole thing was choreographed. Then why didn't you leave? Lydia asked. Because leaving would have looked like guilt. The kettle whistled. Lydia poured hot water over chamomile tea bags, a ritual from their childhood when their mother used tea to calm heated discussions. Some habits survived decades. Malcolm continued documenting Callahan's immediate assumptions, Bauer's obvious discomfort, Darius's phone recording, Evelyn's edited doorbell footage that conveniently cut off the crucial moment. You need to call a press conference, Lydia said, setting a mug beside Malcolm's elbow. Show everyone what really happened. Malcolm paused his writing. With what evidence? Darius's video? A teenager's phone footage against a wealthy woman's security system? You think people will choose his word over hers? I think people will choose the truth. Truth requires proof, Lydia. And proof requires witnesses willing to speak publicly. Malcolm sipped his tea. Anger makes good headlines, but it doesn't win cases. Lydia sat across from him, frustration clear on her face. So we do nothing while she destroys your reputation? We do everything, but we do it right. Across the street, lights blazed in every window of Evelyn's mansion. Through the sheer curtains, Malcolm could see her moving between rooms, phone pressed to her ear. She was working. Malcolm's phone buzzed, a notification from the Ashford Pines neighborhood app. He opened it reluctantly. Evelyn had posted in the private residence forum, I want to thank everyone who reached out after today's frightening incident. It's heartbreaking that speaking up about trespassing and property damage led to physical intimidation by a neighbor who believes his position makes him untouchable. I've lived in Ashford Pines for 12 years. This is my home. I shouldn't have to feel unsafe walking in my own driveway. The post already had 17 comments. Malcolm scrolled through them, his jaw tightening. So sorry this happened to you, Evelyn? We saw the police cars. Are you okay? This is exactly why property values matter. Wrong kind of residents bring wrong kind of problems. That last comment made Malcolm's hands clench around his phone. Lydia noticed. What is it? Malcolm turned the screen toward her. She read silently, her expression growing darker with each comment. Some of these people have said hello to you at the mailbox, Lydia said quietly. Fear changes people. Evelyn knows that. More comments appeared in real time. Some residents defended Evelyn without question. Others stayed conspicuously silent. A few brave souls asked for more details before judging, but they were quickly overwhelmed by supporters rallying around Evelyn's version. Malcolm's phone buzzed again. This time, a text from Marisol Vega. Judge Greer, I saw what really happened. I will testify if needed. Though Evelyn threatened me last year over my late husband's truck in the driveway. She said it lowered property values. Some neighbors are scared of her. Malcolm showed the text to Lydia. Before she could respond, another message arrived. This one from Darius. Mr. Whitmore just drove past my house real slow. Twice. My mom is worried. Malcolm set his phone down carefully. The intimidation had already begun. Preston Whitmore, Evelyn's husband, was making sure potential witnesses understood the cost of speaking up. They're not wasting time, Malcolm said. Neither should we, Lydia replied. Malcolm looked out his window at Evelyn's lit mansion. She stood at her front window now, visible through the glass, still on her phone. Their eyes met across the street for a brief moment before she stepped back into the shadows. Tomorrow, we gather proof, Malcolm said quietly. Malcolm stepped outside into the crisp morning air, the scent of freshly cut grass and blooming flowers greeting him as always. Ashford Pines looked perfect in the golden sunlight. Manicured lawns stretched between elegant homes. Children's bikes sat neatly on driveways. American flags hung from polished poles. But something had changed overnight. He walked toward his mailbox with the same steady pace he always used. Mrs. Patterson, who lived 3 houses down, was watering her flower boxes. Yesterday, she would have waved and asked about his sister's visit. Today, she saw him coming and hurried inside, pulling her watering can with her. The message was clear. Malcolm reached his mailbox and sorted through bills and advertisements. Behind him, he heard footsteps on the sidewalk. He turned to see Mr. and Mrs. Holloway approaching with their 7-year-old grandson, Tommy, who always stopped to pet Malcolm's neighbor's golden retriever. "Good morning," Malcolm said, offering his usual polite nod. Mrs. Holloway grabbed Tommy's hand and pulled him to the far side of the sidewalk. She whispered something urgent in the boy's ear. Tommy looked confused, but obeyed. They hurried past without speaking. The boy glanced back once, clearly puzzled why the nice man who sometimes helped him reach the dog's head was now someone to avoid. Malcolm's chest tightened, but he kept his expression neutral. He had survived worse humiliations. He would survive this. Back at his front door, a folded piece of paper lay wedged against the frame. No name, no signature. Malcolm unfolded it and read the handwritten message. "Maybe it's time to find a neighborhood where you're more comfortable. Some places aren't meant for certain people." The words hit like ice water. Malcolm crumpled the paper slowly, his jaw working. He had been called worse things by better people. But this cowardice, hiding behind anonymous notes, felt particularly poisonous. He walked across the street to Marisol Vega's house. She answered the door quickly, as if she had been watching from her window. "Judge Greer," she said quietly. "Come in, please." Her living room was warm and neat, filled with photos of former students and family. She offered him coffee, but Malcolm shook his head. "Marisol, I need to know exactly what you saw yesterday." She sat across from him, her hands folded carefully. "I saw Evelyn slap herself, clear as day. But I was standing at the side angle, not straight on. A lawyer might say I couldn't see her palm make contact with her cheek." Malcolm nodded. "Would you testify to what you did see?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. Then her voice dropped. "But you should know. Other people are scared. Evelyn controls the HOA Standards Committee. She decides who gets fined for fence height, mailbox color, lawn maintenance. She's made life hell for families over smaller things than this. She's threatened you before. Last year, my late husband's pickup truck sat in the driveway while I decided whether to sell it. Evelyn said it was an eyesore. When I didn't move it fast enough, she started citing me for violations, parking infractions, grass too long by 2 inches, window boxes mounted incorrectly. The fines added up to $800 before I gave in and sold the truck." Malcolm's anger burned steady and cold. She weaponizes the rules against anyone who won't bow down. Families have moved rather than fight her. Malcolm thanked Marisol and walked to the corner where Darius was edging a sidewalk with precision. The teenager looked up nervously as Malcolm approached. "Mr. Bell, I'd like to speak with you privately." Darius shut off his edger and glanced around. "About yesterday? About the recording you made?" The boy's shoulders tensed. "I got it. The whole thing. But Mr. Greer, I can't. My family needs this work." Malcolm kept his voice gentle. "What happened after I left? Mr. Whitmore came by last night. Evelyn's husband. He said unlicensed workers get reported to the county all the time. Said the HOA keeps lists of who's allowed to work in the neighborhood and who isn't. He said kids with phones sometimes film things that look different than what really happened." Malcolm felt his anger spike, but he controlled it. "He threatened your business. My mom works 2 jobs. I help with rent. If I lose my lawn clients—" Darius's voice trailed off. Malcolm looked at this 17-year-old boy who was being crushed between honesty and survival. The same pattern, the same weapon. fear of consequences for people who couldn't afford to fight back. "Darius," Malcolm said quietly, "you tell the truth when you're ready. I won't let them crush you." The Ashford Pines clubhouse felt different under fluorescent lights. What looked elegant during daytime social events now seemed harsh and institutional. Folding chairs filled the main room in crooked rows. Residents filed in with the careful expressions of people attending a public execution. Malcolm entered with Lydia beside him. She wore her best dress, and the fierce look she reserved for hospital administrators who tried to bully nurses. Malcolm had chosen a simple navy suit. He would not perform humility, but he would not give them ammunition either. Evelyn arrived 10 minutes late, moving slowly like someone still in pain. She had darkened the makeup on her left cheek, creating a shadow that looked worse under the clubhouse lights. She wore a cream-colored blouse with the top button undone, suggesting vulnerability. Her husband Preston followed close behind, his hand hovering near her elbow as if she might collapse. Graham Pike, the HOA president, called the meeting to order from behind a folding table that served as a judge's bench. His insurance executive background showed in his careful, liability-conscious language. "We're here to address a serious incident involving resident conduct and neighborhood safety," Pike announced. "Mrs. Whitmore has requested this emergency session due to what she describes as an unprovoked physical assault." Evelyn dabbed her eyes with a tissue. "Thank you, Graham. I never thought I'd have to stand in front of my own neighbors and explain why I'm afraid in my own driveway." She paused for effect. Several residents leaned forward. "Yesterday afternoon, I approached Judge Greer about damage to my rose garden. I was respectful. I was calm. But when I asked him to be more careful about where he walked, he became aggressive. He raised his hand to me." Her voice cracked perfectly. "He struck me right in front of witnesses, in broad daylight, on my own property." Murmurs rippled through the room. An elderly man in the front row shook his head in disgust. A woman near the window whispered to her husband. Malcolm noticed Officer Callahan sitting in the back row, still in civilian clothes, but making his presence obvious. Callahan's arms were crossed, his expression supportive of Evelyn. The message was clear. Even off duty, the police stood with her. "Mrs. Whitmore," Pike said gently, "do you have evidence to support your account?" Evelyn nodded toward her husband, who stood and connected a tablet to the room's television screen. The doorbell footage played on the wall-mounted display. The edited clip showed Malcolm's arm moving near Evelyn's face, then cut to her stumbling backward with her hand on her cheek. The room went silent. The footage looked damning without context. "Judge Greer," Pike said, "you may respond." Malcolm stood. He did not raise his voice or gesture dramatically. His courtroom training served him here. "Thank you, Mr. Pike. I request that this board review all available evidence before making any determination." Mrs. Whitmore's doorbell camera captured only a partial view. Other witnesses were present. Another resident recorded the incident from a different angle. "I ask that you examine the complete picture before imposing any penalties on any resident." Evelyn's lawyer, a sharp-dressed man Malcolm didn't recognize, whispered something in her ear. She stood quickly. "Evidence?" Evelyn's voice rose. "My face is evidence." She turned toward the room, displaying the darkened makeup. "I have a bruise. I have a recording. I have witnesses who saw him threaten me. What more do you need?" Lydia shot to her feet. "This is disgraceful. You people are conducting a lynching in a clubhouse." The room erupted. Some residents gasped at Lydia's word choice. Others muttered agreement. Pike banged his gavel, calling for order. Malcolm touched Lydia's arm gently. "Please, sit down." She looked at him with fire in her eyes, but she recognized the trap. They were waiting for his family to lose control. They wanted to paint him as the angry black man with the angry black sister. She sat down reluctantly. Pike restored quiet, and announced the board's decision. Given the severity of the allegations and the available evidence, we're issuing temporary fines for disruptive conduct and initiating a formal resident review process. Judge Greer, you'll receive documentation of these measures within 24 hours. The meeting dissolved into small groups of whispering neighbors. Some looked at Malcolm with sympathy. Others avoided his eyes entirely. Most seemed relieved the show was over. As Malcolm gathered his jacket, Evelyn approached him near the exit. Her tears had dried completely. Her voice carried just loud enough for nearby residents to hear. "You may know courtrooms, Judge, but I own this room." The morning sun filtered through Malcolm's kitchen windows as he set 3 mugs of coffee on the oak table. Steam rose from each cup, mixing with the tension that had settled over the house since the hearing. Lydia sat across from him, her gray hair pulled back severely, reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed handwritten notes. Marisol occupied the chair between them, her weathered hands wrapped around her mug for warmth. "We're not playing defense anymore," Malcolm said, settling into his chair. "Last night proved they'll twist anything we say. So we investigate. We find the pattern." Lydia looked up from her notes. "What pattern?" "The one Evelyn thinks she's hidden." Malcolm pulled out a legal pad filled with his careful handwriting. "She's too comfortable with this process, too prepared. You don't orchestrate something that elaborate unless you've practiced." Marisol nodded slowly. "She has practiced. I've been in this neighborhood 8 years. I've seen her work." "Tell us," Malcolm said. Marisol's voice grew heavy with old anger. "The Holloways. Frank and Dorothy. They lived 2 streets over in the blue house with the ramp. What happened to them? Frank had a stroke 3 years ago. Left him in a wheelchair. Dorothy built a ramp from their front door to the driveway so he could get outside. Nothing fancy. Just wood planks and railings." Lydia leaned forward. "Let me guess. Evelyn didn't like it." "Evelyn called it an eyesore. Said it violated architectural standards. She got the HOA to fine them $50 a week until they removed it or moved." Malcolm's jaw tightened. $50 a week? Every week. Frank couldn't use the front door anymore. Dorothy had to wheel him out through the garage, down the steep driveway. It was dangerous. They fell twice. Marisol's hands trembled slightly around her mug. "I watched that woman kill their dignity, one fine at a time." "Where are they now?" Lydia asked. "Sunrise Manor. Dorothy sold the house to pay the fines and Frank's medical bills. Frank died 6 months later. Never got to come home again." The kitchen fell silent except for the soft tick of the wall clock. Malcolm wrote carefully in his pad, documenting names, dates, and details. "There's more," Lydia said, consulting her own notes. "I made some calls last night. Remember that delivery driver story you mentioned?" Malcolm looked up. "Go on." "Marcus Webb delivered furniture to Evelyn's house last spring. She demanded he carry everything upstairs and assemble it. When he explained his company only delivers to the door, she accused him of threatening her." "What kind of threats?" "She claimed he raised his voice and stepped toward her aggressively. Filed a complaint with his supervisor and the police. Got him fired." Malcolm added Marcus Webb's name to his growing list. "Did you talk to him?" "His former supervisor. Marcus is a church deacon with 5 kids. Never had a complaint in 12 years until Evelyn. The supervisor said Evelyn called 3 times demanding his termination. Threatened to report the company to the Better Business Bureau and post negative reviews online." Marisol stood and walked to the window overlooking the street. "She goes after people who can't fight back, workers who need their jobs, old folks on fixed incomes, anyone who doesn't have lawyers and connections." Malcolm's phone buzzed with a text message. He read it and looked up grimly. "Darius wants to talk. Says it's important." 20 minutes later, Darius Bell stood in Malcolm's kitchen, his work clothes clean, but his hands still stained with soil. The teenager looked exhausted, older than his 17 years. "Mr. Greer, I need to tell you something about last summer." "What happened last summer?" Lydia asked. Darius shifted his weight from foot to foot. "Mrs. Whitmore accused me of stealing her garden tools, expensive ones, pruning shears, a hedge trimmer, some other stuff. Did you take them?" "No, sir. I never even worked on her property. But she called the police anyway. Said I was in her backyard without permission." Malcolm leaned forward. "What did the police find?" "Nothing at first. They searched my truck, my mom's garage, everywhere. Couldn't find the tools." Darius's voice grew bitter. 2 weeks later, Mrs. Whitmore found them in her own garage. Said she forgot she moved them during a party. "Did she apologize?" Darius laughed harshly. "She said I must have put them back when I realized I was caught. Told the police I was probably planning to steal them again later." Marisol turned from the window. "Did anything happen to you?" "Officer Callahan came by 3 more times that summer. Said he was watching me. Made sure all the neighbors saw his patrol car in my driveway. My mom was terrified. Some clients canceled their lawn service because they didn't want trouble." Malcolm wrote furiously, connecting dates and names. "Callahan again?" "Yes, sir. He and Mrs. Whitmore, they know each other real well." Lydia studied the legal pad over Malcolm's shoulder, reading the growing list of victims. Frank and Dorothy Holloway, Marcus Webb, Darius Bell. Each name represented someone crushed under Evelyn's careful system of accusations and institutional pressure. "This woman didn't make one false accusation," Lydia said quietly. "She built a system." The rain hammered against Malcolm's kitchen windows like angry fists. Each drop caught the porch light and streaked down the glass, turning the world outside into blurred shadows and yellow smears. Malcolm sat at his dining table, legal pad covered with notes, trying to build a case from fragments of truth and broken lives. The soft knock at his back door barely registered above the storm. Malcolm looked up, frowning. Nobody used his back entrance except Lydia when she forgot her key. The knock came again, urgent but quiet. He moved to the door and peered through the small window. A figure stood hunched under the narrow roof overhang, water dripping from his clothes. "Darius?" Malcolm opened the door quickly. The teenager stumbled inside, soaked to the skin and shaking. His work shirt clung to his thin frame, and his sneakers squeaked against the tile floor. "Mr. Greer, I'm sorry. I didn't know where else to go." "What happened?" "You're freezing." Lydia appeared from the living room, took one look at Darius, and immediately grabbed a kitchen towel. "Honey, what are you doing out in this weather?" Darius accepted the towel, but his hands trembled as he dried his face. "Mr. Whitmore followed my truck again. 3rd time this week. Tonight, he got out at the red light on Maple Street." Malcolm felt his jaw tighten. "Did he threaten you?" "Not exactly. He just stood there staring at me through my window. Didn't say nothing, but I got the message." Darius looked around the warm kitchen like he couldn't believe he was safe. "I drove around for an hour before coming here. Made sure nobody followed me." Marisol emerged from the living room, where she had been helping Lydia organize victim statements. She saw Darius's condition and immediately started making coffee. "They're trying to scare you quiet," Malcolm said. "I know, but I can't keep running." Darius reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. The screen was cracked, but functional. "I need to give you this before they take it away from me." Malcolm's pulse quickened. "The video?" "Everything. From when she first came out yelling until the police left." Darius's voice grew stronger. "I was scared before, but watching Mr. Whitmore circle my neighborhood like some kind of predator, that made me mad." They gathered around the kitchen table. Darius pulled up the video file and set his phone in the center where everyone could see. "This is from when she first stormed out of her house," Darius explained, pressing play. The footage was remarkably clear. Darius had held his phone steady, and his position near the sidewalk captured everything. Evelyn's voice came through crisp and sharp as she accused Malcolm of trespassing. Malcolm watched himself on the small screen, hands visible, body language calm but alert. He saw how Evelyn kept advancing, forcing him backward toward her doorbell camera's view. "There," Marisol whispered. "She's positioning herself." On the video, Evelyn pointed directly at Malcolm's face, her finger inches from his nose. Malcolm raised one hand, palm out, and said clearly, "Ma'am, you need to step back." What happened next was undeniable. Evelyn's right hand came up fast and struck her own left cheek with a sharp slap that echoed on the recording. The sound was distinct, deliberate. Then she stumbled backward dramatically, arms flailing, and screamed, "He hit me! He hit me!" "Jesus Christ!" Lydia breathed. They watched the rest in silence, neighbors appearing. The 911 call, Callahan arriving and immediately treating Malcolm like a criminal. Evelyn's performance of wounded innocence. When the video ended, the kitchen fell quiet except for rain against the windows. "That's evidence," Malcolm said finally. "Clear as daylight," Marisol agreed. Malcolm immediately called Angela Royce, his longtime attorney. Despite the late hour, she answered on the second ring. "Malcolm, what's wrong?" "Angela, I need you to see something. Tonight." 30 minutes later, Angela sat in Malcolm's living room, her silver hair still perfect, despite being pulled from her evening routine. She wore jeans and a Georgetown law sweatshirt, but her sharp eyes were all business. She watched Darius's video twice without comment. "Well," she said finally, "this changes everything. Can you get preservation notices out tonight?" "Already drafting them in my head. Police department, HOA board, and Evelyn's legal representation if she has any." Angela's fingers moved quickly across her phone screen. "This video needs to be protected immediately." "What about Darius? They're intimidating him." Angela looked at the teenager, who sat quietly on Malcolm's couch with a cup of coffee warming his hands. "Darius, how old are you?" 17, ma'am." "Still a minor." "That gives us additional legal protections." She turned back to Malcolm. "I'm filing a harassment complaint against Preston Whitmore first thing Monday morning." Malcolm's phone buzzed with a voicemail. He listened and looked up with surprise. "Officer Bauer. He says Callahan's report has serious problems, and the department is reviewing the incident." Lydia clapped her hands together. "Finally." "There's more," Malcolm said, checking his email. "The HOA canceled tomorrow's disciplinary meeting. Temporary postponement pending new information." For the first time in days, hope filled the room like warm light. Marisol smiled. Lydia hugged Darius's shoulders. Angela nodded with professional satisfaction. Malcolm picked up Darius's phone and watched the crucial moment one more time. Evelyn's hand striking her own face. The deliberate stumble. The calculated scream. He set the phone down carefully and looked around at the people who had stood with him when the lie seemed stronger than the truth. Truth, finally, has a face. Malcolm woke to Lydia's voice, cutting through the morning quiet like a blade. "Malcolm! Get in here now!" The panic in her tone shot him upright. He pulled on a robe and rushed to the living room, where Lydia stood frozen in front of the television, remote trembling in her hand. The Channel 7 Morning News played Evelyn's doorbell footage on loop. The edited clip showed Malcolm's arm moving near her face, but the angle cut off at the crucial moment. To anyone watching quickly, it looked damning. "Federal judge under scrutiny after alleged neighborhood assault," the headline read. The anchor's voice filled the room. Judge Malcolm Greer of the U.S. District Court is facing questions this morning After doorbell camera footage appears to show him in a physical altercation with his neighbor, Evelyn Whitmore, outside her Ashford Pines home. Malcolm's stomach dropped. "Where's the real video?" "That's not all," Lydia said, her voice tight with rage. "Keep watching." The news cut to Evelyn on her front lawn, tears streaming down her face as reporters held microphones toward her. She wore a simple white blouse and looked fragile against her mansion's brick facade. "I never wanted this public attention," Evelyn said, dabbing her eyes. "But powerful people are trying to intimidate me into silence. They want me to disappear my story because it's inconvenient for them." A reporter asked, "What do you say to those claiming you fabricated the assault?" Evelyn's voice broke. "I have doorbell footage. I have a police report. I have bruises on my face. What more do they need?" Malcolm grabbed his phone and called Angela. She answered immediately. "Malcolm, we have a problem. I'm watching the news. It's worse than that. The video file I received last night is corrupted. Half the data is missing, and what's left shows pixelated garbage." Malcolm's blood ran cold. "What about Darius's original? That's the bigger problem." "Darius was detained this morning." The words hit Malcolm like a physical blow. "Detained?" "Officer Callahan claims he matched the description of someone vandalizing mailboxes last night. His phone was seized as possible evidence. And Malcolm?" Angela's voice grew grim. "Someone accessed Darius's cloud account from an unknown device at 3 a.m. The original video is gone." Malcolm sank onto his couch. Lydia sat beside him, her face pale with fury. "They moved fast," Angela continued. "Whoever orchestrated this knew exactly what they were doing. Professional-level digital cleanup." Malcolm's phone buzzed with notifications. The HOA had sent another emergency email reinstating his disciplinary review. Comments flooded the neighborhood forum, calling him a dangerous predator and demanding his removal. Then his phone rang. The caller ID showed Rosa Bell, Darius's mother. "Judge Greer." Her voice was thick with tears. "They took my boy. They took his phone. He didn't do nothing to nobody's mailbox. He was home with me all night watching movies." "Mrs. Bell, I'm going to help." "No!" Her voice cracked. "You can't help nobody now. They're saying he was working with you to destroy evidence. They're saying my son's a criminal. His landscaping clients are already canceling. How's he going to pay for college now? How's he going to have any future?" The line went dead. Malcolm stared at his phone, the weight of responsibility crushing down on him. Everyone who had stood with him was paying the price. Darius, just 17 years old, was being destroyed for telling the truth. Marisol would be next. Then Lydia. "This is my fault," he said quietly. "Like hell it is." Lydia's voice blazed with righteous anger. "That woman is a snake, and snakes bite when they're cornered." Outside, Malcolm could see neighbors walking past his house with deliberate distance, their faces turned away. A news van had parked across the street. His own driveway felt like a stage where he was trapped in someone else's play. The doorbell rang. Through the window, Malcolm saw two reporters approaching his front door. He closed his eyes, feeling the careful life he'd built crumbling around him. Every person who had believed in him was suffering because they'd stood up for what was right. Later that night, after the reporters had finally left, after the phone calls from concerned colleagues, after Angela had delivered more bad news about the investigation expanding, Malcolm sat alone in his late wife's favorite chair. Lydia appeared carrying an old shoebox, its corners worn soft with age. She placed it gently on the coffee table before him. "Renee's letters," she said simply. Malcolm looked at the box, remembering how his wife had written him notes throughout their marriage. Little encouragements tucked into his briefcase, longer letters during difficult cases. Lydia opened the box and pulled out an envelope marked, "When you become a judge." Renee had given it to him on his swearing-in day, but he'd been too overwhelmed to read it then. "Read it," Lydia said. Malcolm's hands shook slightly as he unfolded the letter. Renee's careful handwriting filled 2 pages, but one paragraph made him stop breathing. "You have a gift, Malcolm, but it's not power. It's patience. You always let arrogant people reveal themselves. You wait, and you watch, and you remember everything. Then, when they think they've won, you show them exactly who they really are. Don't ever lose that." Lydia sat back and watched her brother's face change as he read. "Your wife knew you never let bullies write the ending," she said quietly. Malcolm sat in the lamplight, rain drumming against the windows like impatient fingers. Renee's letter lay open in his hands, her words cutting through the fog of his anger and frustration. "You always let arrogant people reveal themselves. You wait, and you watch, and you remember everything." He had been fighting Evelyn's game instead of playing his own, chasing the stolen video, demanding immediate justice, pushing for quick resolution. But that wasn't how he'd built his reputation on the federal bench. That wasn't how he'd exposed corruption, dismantled lies, or protected the innocent. Malcolm folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the box. The rain continued its steady rhythm as he pulled out a legal pad and began writing. Not in anger this time, but with the methodical precision that had served him for decades. Who benefited from Darius's phone disappearing? Who had the connections to make it happen so quickly? Who knew exactly which evidence to target? The answer wasn't just Evelyn. She was wealthy and manipulative, but she didn't have direct access to police evidence. Someone else had helped her. Someone with badges and authority, who wanted this story buried as much as she did. Malcolm wrote down Callahan's name, then drew a line connecting him to the HOA, to Preston Whitmore, to the seized phone. The corruption wasn't just about one false accusation. It was about a network of people protecting each other. By 3 in the morning, Malcolm had filled 4 pages with connections, timelines, and questions. His phone showed 17 missed calls from reporters and 3 voicemails from colleagues expressing concern. But for the first time since this nightmare began, he felt clear. He wasn't going to chase their evidence anymore. He was going to find his own. The rain stopped just before dawn. Malcolm dozed in Renee's chair until Lydia woke him with coffee and the morning news. Evelyn's story had gained national attention overnight. The headlines painted him as an arrogant federal judge hiding behind his position after assaulting a suburban woman. "You look different," Lydia said, studying his face. "Renee reminded me who I am," Malcolm replied. After breakfast, Malcolm walked to Marisol's house. She answered the door in her gardening clothes, dirt under her fingernails, and worry in her eyes. "I saw the news," she said immediately. "This is getting worse." "It's about to get better," Malcolm said. "But I need you to think back. When the Holloways lived across from Evelyn, did they have security cameras?" Marisol's eyes widened. "Yes. Tom Holloway installed one after someone kept knocking over his trash cans. He was convinced it was Evelyn's husband, but he could never prove it." "Where was the camera positioned?" "On their front porch, pointing toward the street. It would have captured the whole sidewalk area where—" Marisol trailed off as understanding dawned. "Where you and Evelyn fought. Is it still there?" "I don't think so. But their daughter Nina still has access to everything because the house sale got delayed. Something about title issues." Marisol gripped Malcolm's arm. "Malcolm, if that camera caught what really happened, then we have her." Malcolm returned home and found Nina Holloway's contact information through public records. She lived 30 minutes away and worked as an accountant for a small firm. He called her office number. "Ms. Holloway, this is Judge Malcolm Greer. I believe you know why I'm calling." Nina's voice was cool, professional. "I saw the news. My parents were driven out of that neighborhood by that woman's harassment. But I don't know how I can help you." Malcolm took a breath. "A 17-year-old boy named Darius Bell is sitting in detention right now because he tried to help me. His phone was seized, his video was erased, and his family's business is being destroyed. All because he recorded the truth." The line went quiet for a long moment. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" Nina's voice had softened slightly. "Your parents' security camera. Do you still have access to the footage from yesterday afternoon?" Another pause. "I might. But Judge, my parents went through hell because of Evelyn Whitmore. I'm not sure I want to get pulled back into her crosshairs." "She's doing to me exactly what she did to them," Malcolm said, "and she'll keep doing it to others until someone stops her." Nina sighed. "Let me check the archive. I'll call you back within the hour." Malcolm hung up and paced his living room, watching the clock. Lydia brought him lunch, but he couldn't eat. Every minute felt like an eternity while Darius sat in detention and Evelyn's lies spread further across the internet. 47 minutes later, his phone rang. "Judge Greer?" Nina's voice was breathless, excited. Her camera didn't just see it. It heard her. The Holloway house felt like a tomb. Dust particles danced in the afternoon sunlight, streaming through bare windows. The hardwood floors creaked under their footsteps as Malcolm, Angela, Lydia, Marisol, and Nina gathered around a small folding table Nina had brought from her car. Nina opened her laptop and connected it to a portable speaker. Her fingers trembled slightly as she navigated to the security system's cloud archive. "I almost deleted everything last month," Nina said, scrolling through folders of saved footage. "After my parents moved, I didn't want any reminders of this place. Thank God I procrastinated." Angela leaned forward, her legal pad ready. "What time frame are we looking at?" "The incident happened around 3:15 yesterday," Malcolm said, "based on when the police arrived." Nina found the file and clicked play. The camera angle was perfect. It captured the entire sidewalk area between Malcolm's driveway and Evelyn's front yard. The timestamp read 3:14 p.m. They watched Malcolm walking back from Marisol's house, peaceful and unhurried. Then Evelyn burst from her driveway like a woman possessed, pointing and shouting. Even with the audio slightly muffled by distance, her accusations were clear. "You stepped on my property! You damaged my roses!" Malcolm's calm response came through clearly. "Ma'am, I didn't touch your yard. I was helping Mrs. Vega across the sidewalk." Evelyn advanced, jabbing her finger closer to his face with each word. Malcolm stepped back, raising one hand in a defensive gesture. "Lower your hand," Malcolm said firmly. "You need to back up." That was the moment. Evelyn's face twisted with rage and something else. Calculation. She drew her right hand back and slapped her own cheek with a sharp crack that made everyone in the room flinch. Lydia gasped. My God, she really did it. Evelyn stumbled backward theatrically, clutching her face. He hit me. He hit me right in front of my house. The performance was chilling in its precision. Every gesture looked convincing from a distance. Only the clear camera angle revealed the truth. "Keep watching," Nina whispered. The police arrived exactly as Malcolm remembered. Callahan emerged from his patrol car, already treating Malcolm as the aggressor. Bauer looked uncertain but followed his partner's lead. Evelyn rushed toward them, sobbing and pointing. Angela scribbled notes furiously. "Look at Callahan's body language. He's not investigating. He's validating her story." The footage continued. Evelyn produced her phone, showing the officers her edited doorbell clip. Callahan seized on it immediately while Bauer shifted uncomfortably. Malcolm stood with his hands visible, never raising his voice, never making a threatening gesture. Then came the devastating part. After the patrol cars left and most neighbors had returned inside, Preston Whitmore walked across the street. The camera caught him approaching Darius, who was loading his mower into his pickup truck. Preston's voice carried clearly in the quiet afternoon air. "Kid, you need to understand something. That video on your phone? It doesn't exist. You try to share it, and I'll make sure the city knows about your unlicensed landscaping operation. You'll lose every client in this neighborhood. Your family will lose their house." Darius's young voice cracked as he responded, "Sir, I wasn't doing nothing wrong. You were recording private property without consent. That's a crime. Delete the video or face the consequences." The teenager nodded frantically and climbed into his truck. Preston watched him drive away, then strolled back across the street with the satisfied air of a man who had just solved a problem. But the most damning moment came next. Evelyn appeared on her front porch, still wearing the victim's mask she had performed for the police. Preston climbed the steps, and they stood close together, speaking in low voices. The camera's sensitive microphone caught every word. "Is it handled?" Evelyn asked. "The kid won't be a problem. His family needs the work too much to risk it." Evelyn smiled, not the tearful, frightened expression she had shown the police, but a cold, satisfied smirk. "Perfect. He'll move now. They always move when you make staying expensive enough." The room went silent except for the laptop's fan humming. Angela stopped writing. Marisol covered her mouth with both hands. Lydia's jaw had dropped open. Nina paused the video and looked around the table. "There's more. After you left, she made phone calls. I can hear her through the window talking about calling HOA members, coordinating stories." Angela closed her legal pad with a sharp snap. "This is it. This destroys everything. Her credibility, Callahan's report, the HOA's rush to judgment. It shows premeditation, witness intimidation, and conspiracy." "We could release this online right now," Lydia said, her voice tight with anger. "Let the whole world see what she really is." Malcolm shook his head. "No, not yet." "Malcolm," Lydia protested, "this proves everything. Why wait?" Angela understood immediately. "Because we need to control the setting. If we leak this online, Evelyn's lawyers will claim it's doctored or taken out of context. Her supporters will say it's a setup. We need to force her into a position where she can't escape or spin the truth." Malcolm nodded. "Exactly. We demand a formal public HOA hearing. We make her repeat her lies in front of the entire community, on the record, with witnesses present. Then we play this footage." "She'll be trapped," Marisol whispered. "She can't back down without admitting she lied, but if she doubles down—" "The truth destroys her completely," Angela finished. "In public, where everyone can see." Angela opened her briefcase and pulled out her phone. "I'll draft a formal demand for a public hearing immediately. We cite Malcolm's right to face his accusers, due process, and the need for community transparency. They can't refuse without looking guilty themselves." As Angela began typing, Malcolm looked out the window at Evelyn's mansion across the street. She was in her front yard, tending to those precious roses, with the careful attention of someone maintaining a perfect facade. Soon, that facade would crumble in front of everyone. Angela finished her message and hit send. "Done. I've demanded a full public hearing within 48 hours, with all evidence reviewed openly. I've also requested that all relevant parties be present, including the police officers who responded." Malcolm smiled for the first time in days. This time, she performs for the truth. The Ashford Pines clubhouse had never held so many people. Every folding chair was occupied. Residents lined the walls. Others stood in the back, craning their necks to see the front table where Graham Pike sat with the other HOA board members. Malcolm entered through the side door with Angela beside him. Lydia and Marisol followed close behind. The crowd's murmur grew louder as people recognized the federal judge who had become the center of their neighborhood's biggest scandal. Then Evelyn arrived. She swept through the main entrance like royalty, wearing a cream-colored dress that made her look fragile and innocent. Preston walked beside her in a crisp navy suit, his hand protectively on her back. Her cheeks still showed faint discoloration from makeup she had carefully applied to suggest lingering injury. Behind them came Officer Brent Callahan, dressed in civilian clothes but clearly aligned with the HOA leadership. He took a seat in the third row, directly behind Graham Pike. His presence sent a message. The police supported Evelyn's version of events. Officer Travis Bauer stood at the very back of the room, near the emergency exit. His face was pale, and he kept shifting his weight from foot to foot. He looked like a man carrying a secret that was eating him alive. Near the front, a woman with a notebook and press badge sat ready to document everything. Evelyn had personally invited the reporter from the Ashford Gazette, expecting tonight to cement her role as the brave victim standing against powerful intimidation. Graham Pike called the meeting to order. His voice shook slightly as he read the formal purpose: a review of allegations made against Judge Malcolm Greer and the community response to those allegations. "Mrs. Whitmore," Pike said, "you requested this public forum. Please share your statement." Evelyn rose gracefully, dabbing her eyes with a tissue before she even began speaking. "Thank you, Graham. Thank you all for being here tonight." Her voice quavered with practiced emotion. "I never wanted this attention. I never wanted to be in the news or have my private pain become public. But when someone uses their power and position to try to silence me, I have no choice but to speak out." She turned toward Malcolm, pointing with a trembling finger. "Judge Greer thinks his title makes him untouchable. He thinks he can intimidate witnesses, pressure officials, and make this whole thing disappear. But I won't be silenced. I won't let him use his influence to cover up what he did to me in my own driveway." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some residents nodded sympathetically. Others looked uncomfortable, glancing between Evelyn and Malcolm with uncertainty. "I've lived in Ashford Pines for 12 years, Evelyn continued. "I've given my time, my energy, and my money to make this community better. I've served on committees, organized events, and helped maintain the standards that keep our property values high. And now, because I dared to confront someone who was trespassing on my property, I'm being attacked by lawyers and investigators and people trying to destroy my reputation." She paused, letting tears gather in her eyes. "All I did was protect my home, and for that, I was assaulted and humiliated. Now they want to make me the villain." The reporter scribbled notes furiously. Several residents wiped their own eyes, moved by Evelyn's performance. Malcolm remained perfectly still throughout her speech, his hands folded on the table in front of him. When Pike asked if he wanted to respond, he stood slowly. "Thank you, Mr. Pike." Malcolm's voice was calm and measured. "I understand emotions are high tonight. Mrs. Whitmore has painted herself as a victim, and if her story were true, she would deserve everyone's sympathy and support." He looked around the room, making eye contact with residents he had barely met, but who would judge him based on tonight. "False accusations don't just harm the accused," Malcolm said. "They harm real victims who won't be believed. They corrupt the institutions we depend on for justice. They poison communities that should be built on trust and truth." He turned toward Evelyn. "Mrs. Whitmore has asked for this public forum. She has demanded transparency. So let's have it." Angela stood and connected her laptop to the clubhouse's projection screen. "What you're about to see is security footage from a camera across the street, archived by the Holloway family before they moved from this neighborhood." The screen flickered to life, showing a clear view of Evelyn's driveway from 2 evenings ago. The timestamp in the corner confirmed the date and time. The room watched Malcolm walking past Evelyn's property. They saw Evelyn storm out of her house, pointing and shouting. They watched Malcolm step back, raise one hand, and say something that made Evelyn even angrier. Then they saw Evelyn's hand rise to her own face. The slap was unmistakable. Her own palm struck her own cheek with enough force to redden the skin. She stumbled backward theatrically and opened her mouth to scream. Gasps exploded throughout the clubhouse. Someone dropped their purse. Another person stood up so fast their chair fell backward. "That's not real!" Evelyn shouted, her composed mask finally cracking. "That video has been doctored. They edited it to make me look." "Wait," Angela said calmly. She advanced the footage to show the police arriving. The room watched Callahan immediately side with Evelyn, saw him threaten Malcolm with handcuffs, witnessed the bias that poisoned the investigation from the first moment. "Still fake," Evelyn insisted, but her voice was rising to a shriek. "They can make videos show anything now." Angela let the footage continue. After the police cars drove away, it showed Preston approaching Darius by his truck. The audio wasn't perfectly clear, but the threatening body language was obvious. Then came the moment that destroyed everything. Evelyn's voice, crystal clear through the Holloway camera's microphone, floating across the quiet street. "He'll move. They always move when you make staying expensive enough." The clubhouse fell into absolute silence. Even the reporter had stopped writing, her pen frozen above her notebook. Malcolm stood and turned to face the packed room. His voice carried the quiet authority of a federal courtroom. "Now," he said, "who else did she do this to?" Marisol Vega rose slowly from her chair in the third row. Her voice carried the firm authority of 30 years as a school principal, cutting through the stunned silence like a blade. "I saw her do it," Marisol said clearly. "I was standing right there when Evelyn slapped herself. I saw her position herself in front of that camera. I saw her force Judge Greer into the frame. And I've been afraid to say it because this woman has threatened me before." The room stirred. Heads turned. Whispers began. "She threatened you?" Graham Pike asked, his face pale. "Over my husband's old pickup truck," Marisol continued. "She said it lowered property values. She said if I didn't get rid of it, she'd find other violations. She'd make my life here miserable." Near the back of the room, Darius Bell stepped forward with his mother beside him. His landscaping uniform was wrinkled from detention, but his voice was steady. "Preston Whitmore came to my house," Darius said. "He told me unlicensed workers aren't welcome in Ashford Pines. He said I could lose all my clients if I caused trouble for his wife. He said nobody would believe a kid with a phone over a respected neighbor." Mrs. Bell's hand tightened on her son's shoulder. "My boy was terrified. He thought telling the truth would destroy his future." "It nearly did," Darius added. "Officer Callahan took my phone, deleted my video, and made up that mailbox vandalism story to shut me up." Angela gestured to Nina Holloway, who had been sitting quietly near the front. Nina stood, her accountant's composure barely containing years of suppressed anger. "Evelyn Whitmore harassed my parents for 8 months," Nina said, her voice shaking. "My father needed a wheelchair ramp after his stroke. She called it an eyesore. She filed complaint after complaint until the HOA fined them every week. My parents sold their home of 20 years because they couldn't afford to keep fighting her." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Several residents looked genuinely horrified. Angela opened her folder and pulled out a stack of documents. "I have sworn statements from Marcus Webb, the delivery driver Mrs. Whitmore falsely accused of threatening her when he refused to carry furniture inside for free. His supervisor confirms he was fired based solely on her complaint." She held up another paper. "I have a statement from Carlos Mendez, the handyman she accused of stealing tools that were later found in her own garage. He lost 3 contracts because word spread that he was a thief." "This stops now," Graham Pike declared, trying to salvage his authority. The HOA had no knowledge of these incidents. "That's nonsense!" someone shouted from the crowd. "You knew!" another resident called out. "You all knew, and you let it happen because she writes big checks." "Graham, you need to resign," Marisol said firmly. "Right now. Tonight." "I second that," called a voice from the back. "I third it," shouted another. Pike's face went from pale to gray. He looked around the room, seeing nothing but angry faces and pointing fingers. I hereby resign from the position of HOA president, effective immediately." Near the emergency exit, Officer Travis Bauer stepped forward, his uniform disheveled and his face flushed with shame. "I need to say something," Bauer announced. "Officer Callahan pressured me to support Mrs. Whitmore's version before we reviewed any evidence. He said she was connected, that questioning her would cause problems for both of us. I went along with it because I was scared. But I was wrong, and I'm filing a corrected report tomorrow morning." Callahan, who had been sitting stone-faced through the entire presentation, suddenly stood and stormed toward the exit. "This is a disgrace!" he spat. "Officer Callahan," the reporter called, scrambling to follow him. "Do you have a comment about the allegations?" "No comment!" Callahan barked, shoving through the doors, but the cameras followed him outside. In the clubhouse, Evelyn remained frozen in her chair, her perfect composure finally shattered. Her makeup was smeared, her hands trembling. The woman who had commanded the room just minutes before now looked small and exposed. Preston grabbed her elbow roughly. "We're leaving." "Now!" "No," Evelyn said, yanking her arm away. "This isn't over. They can't just—" "It's over, Evelyn," Preston hissed. "Get up. We're going home." But as they tried to leave, the reporter and her cameraman intercepted them outside the clubhouse doors. News cameras rolled as Evelyn's careful facade completely collapsed under the bright lights. "Mrs. Whitmore, do you have a response to the video evidence?" the reporter asked. "This is all lies," Evelyn screamed, her voice cracking. "That man ruined everything. He destroyed my reputation, my standing in this community. He ruined my life." Malcolm stepped into the camera's view, his expression calm and dignified. He looked directly at Evelyn, then at the camera. "No, Mrs. Whitmore," he said quietly. "You finally met evidence." The morning sun streamed through Malcolm's kitchen windows as 5 people crowded around his laptop, coffee cups forgotten as they watched Channel 7's morning news broadcast. The anchor's voice filled the quiet room with words that felt surreal after weeks of lies. New video evidence has completely exonerated federal judge Malcolm Greer, who was falsely accused of assault by his neighbor in the upscale Ashford Pines community. The footage, obtained from a security camera across the street, clearly shows Evelyn Whitmore striking herself before claiming Judge Greer had attacked her. Lydia squeezed Malcolm's shoulder as the screen showed the Holloway camera footage in its entirety. Every damning second played out in crystal clarity. Evelyn's calculated approach, her theatrical stumble, her cold satisfaction as she called 911. "Oh my God," Darius whispered, then quickly apologized to the adults in the room. "Sorry, ma'am," he said to Lydia, who waved him off with a smile. "Language is the least of our concerns right now," Angela said, scrolling through emails on her phone. "Malcolm, the police department just issued a statement. Callahan's been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation into his conduct. Internal Affairs wants to interview you this afternoon." Marisol leaned forward, her eyes fixed on the television as the reporter continued. "Mrs. Whitmore's husband, Preston Whitmore, is also facing complaints for alleged witness intimidation, including threats made against a teenage landscaping worker who recorded the incident." "They're talking about me on TV," Darius said, his voice full of wonder and disbelief. "My mom's gonna freak out when she sees this." The broadcast cut to footage from last night's confrontation outside the clubhouse. Malcolm watched himself on screen, calm and dignified, even as Evelyn screamed accusations. His own words echoed back. "You finally met evidence." "Right, she did," Lydia muttered into her coffee cup. Angela's phone buzzed constantly with calls and messages. "The HOA board met in emergency session at 6 this morning," she announced. "Evelyn's been removed from all committees, and they're launching a full review of every complaint she's filed in the past 5 years. They want to settle this quickly before more lawsuits start flying." Malcolm nodded slowly. The vindication felt good, but it wasn't enough. Not when he thought about all the people Evelyn had terrorized over the years. "I want to file that civil claim we discussed," he said. "Not for personal damages. For a community accountability fund." Angela looked up from her phone. "You're sure? You could ask for significant personal compensation, given what she put you through." "I don't need her money," Malcolm replied firmly. "But this neighborhood needs protection from people like her. A legal defense fund for workers, seniors, anyone who gets targeted by HOA abuse. Make sure it's big enough to sting." Darius shifted nervously in his chair. "Judge Greer, what if she tries to come after me again? I mean, my business, my family." "She won't," Malcolm said with quiet confidence. "Her power came from operating in shadows. She's got no shadows left to hide in." The news moved on to other stories, but Angela kept working her phone. Over the next hour, she fielded calls from reporters, the police department, and several attorneys representing other Evelyn Whitmore victims who were suddenly coming forward. "This is bigger than we thought," she said, after hanging up from a particularly long call. "I've got 3 more families wanting to file complaints." The Hendersons say she got their contractor banned for being too ethnic. The Parkers say she reported their teenage son for suspicious behavior when he was walking home from school. And there's a woman named Sarah Holloway, whose elderly mother was fined into selling her house. Malcolm felt his jaw tighten. How many people did she hurt? "We're about to find out," Angela said grimly. 3 weeks later, the transformation of Ashford Pines was visible everywhere Malcolm looked. Legal notices had been posted on every community bulletin board. Emergency elections had been held. Settlement checks had been cut to victims of what the local newspaper now called the Whitmore pattern. Marisol had been elected HOA president by the largest margin in the community's history. Her first official act was implementing new policies requiring evidence review before any resident could be fined or reported to authorities. Her second was establishing the Malcolm Greer Community Defense Fund with money from the civil settlement. Darius's landscaping business had exploded with new clients. Neighbors who had once avoided the teenager now specifically requested his services, wanting to show their support. His truck was booked solid for the next 2 months. The "For Sale" sign in front of Evelyn's mansion had gone up a week ago. Malcolm had watched the movers load boxes while Evelyn sat in her car, refusing to look at any of her former neighbors. Preston had already moved out, their marriage apparently another casualty of their public exposure. Now, Malcolm stood on the community walkway, holding steady a young rose bush, while Darius carefully packed soil around its roots. Lydia sat on a nearby bench, watching with obvious pride as her brother worked alongside the teenager he'd protected. "These are gonna be beautiful when they bloom," Darius said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Mrs. Vega picked good colors. Red, white, and pink." Malcolm looked up at the old oak trees that dotted the neighborhood, their branches swaying gently in the afternoon breeze. Renee had loved those trees. She'd said they made the whole community feel rooted, permanent, like a place where people could build real lives. "You know what I learned through all this?" Malcolm said, brushing dirt from his hands as he straightened up. "What's that?" Darius asked. Malcolm gazed at the trees, thinking of his wife's letters, of truth finally finding light, of a neighborhood that had chosen justice over comfort. Some places don't become home until you make room for the truth. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.